Welcome to the Language of Creativity podcast, episode 3, What's in a Name? I'm trying something a little bit different. I have the mic rolling while I am solo here, just to warm up in the I Create Sound Studio podcast room, because it has been a couple weeks since I've recorded an episode. I am extremely busy at the moment, mixing 2 albums and mixing demos for a 3rd project, and just kind of in overall wrap-up mode on a lot of things all at once, including this project that you're hearing the music in the background, Lobate Scarp, Adam Sears, from the upcoming album You Have It All. Podcast came out, very, very pleased with how it's turning out, and all the other little nuts and bolts that go along to that. There's a lot that goes into launching a business. I had an idea, but I think most of the time you have no idea how much, especially if you want to do good at something, you want to market it well, you want it to be consistent, you want people to know what to expect and to be able to come back. My intention was to release an episode every 2 weeks, and for that reason I waited to release it, and I backlogged a ton of episodes, but then it kind of basically I had to edit one of them all by myself, which I'm a professional sound engineer, so that's not hard, except this one episode was like 2 hours of content, and it was all good, and it was a very important episode, so I had to really get in there and spend some time with it to get it down in length without neutering the content. I'm very pleased with the result, but that was, between that and all the other work that I've been blessed with lately, it did take an extra week or 2 to get that out, and so I am going to release one of the episodes that I've backlogged. This upcoming episode is with my friend Michael Zimmerlich, founder of 80/20 Records, and it's a very, very fun interview, a lot lighter than the second one, which was amazing, but covered a topic of genocide as well as other things, and definitely, so this will be a lot more fun, and we talk about creativity, we talk about some of our favorite books, we talk about Walt Disney and Elon Musk and Richard Branson and all kinds of fun entrepreneurialness, and just kind of talk about creativity from a business perspective. Also, Mike's record label is founded on the Pareto principle, so we get into a little philosophy there, but just a little mystery of life stuff. But for the most part, very fun episode, a lot shorter. So without further ado, here is my interview with my friend Michael Zimmerlich.
I am not a weed, I'm just an unloved flower. Was trying to be weed, but then they hardest to me. Got to stay discreet so they don't know my power. I am not a weed, but still this poison sprays on me. But I will stay still, and it will pollinate the will. 'Cause if you make your note aloud, then it is sound. Yeah, when they say you're not allowed, it's just a dare to turn it all around. Scribble down your notes, I'll bet there's sound. Strike a chord and you're mumbling, yeah, suckered in to think your theories won't resound.
Michael Zimmerlich is here. Yes, finally.
I'm here back in the studio.
At long last, we're not on a phone.
Yeah. No, that that was great. I was like getting ready for a show, and you're like, "Hey, can we do a podcast right now?" Yes, absolutely.
So ready for anything.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Zing. Well, it's good to have Michael Zimmerlich here in I Create Sound Studio, because he's a close personal friend of mine, and I would consider a colleague and a mensch, an Ubermensch, if you will. Mike is a manager and also he owns an entrepreneur. He has a record label called 80/20 Records. which is kind of based around the Pareto principle, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So what made you glom on to 80-20 as a concept?
Right at the time, it was just when I graduated college, actually, and I really just found this principle called the Pareto principle, which is basically the fact that they found that 80% of things yield 20% of the results, or vice versa, in both, not only in just business, but in nature as well. And in fact, in one of my favorite nature examples is that they found that 80% of peas are in 20% of pea pods. And I thought that was an incredible discovery, and realize of how much that rings true with all kinds of businesses. Normally, on average, 20% of your customers yield 80% of your revenue, and it just kind of blew my mind, honestly, on that whole concept. So I just kind of ran with it, because I just thought it was so fascinating. It really was the first time that I realized how much the results that you do is not directly related to how much work you put into it. And it really started making me think on how to be smarter of the things that I'm doing. Not to necessarily work less, but to be smarter on the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, to take the work you're doing and put it toward something that's actually going to yield you benefit, right?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I guess in that way, it's sort of like the golden mean, right? Or the golden ratio in Leonardo, where it's like all of a sudden you see this ratio that exists in nature. You know, it's in your body, it's in plants, it's in all these things. And so someone finds this Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle, and it just seems to hold true across many things.
Right.
And no one knows why.
No, and it's not even a question of even why. It's more or less a question of it's actually, what I discovered is not necessarily even the numbers themselves, but also the fact that not all things are created equally. And that also is what ring true to me a lot as well, is the fact that it's not going to be even across the board. That's not how life works. So you're going to have things that are going to be more beneficial to you than other things. And it really just helps you a lot in just realizing with life, like what truly makes you happy. And usually is that smaller, it's like finding that, the 20% of whatever the case is of everything that you're doing that makes you happy, and then take that 20% and make that 80% of your life.
Right.
It's just like, it's really not even the numbers specifically, is the fact that, there's part that is a small amount that is yielding you the most out of your life. And then there's a larger amount that's yielding you the smallest amount in your life. Right. And it's just identifying what those things are.
Mike, I just got to say, it's so great to have you in the same room.
Yes, I know, right?
Mike now lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're in Los Angeles, California. So you're out for the weekend doing one of your power entrepreneur weekends out here, as you do.
Yep.
And every time we have the chance, we try and get together, and it's very cool. You went to Disneyland?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge Disney nerd, so anytime I come out here, if I have a chance to go to Disneyland, I'll do it.
Yeah, Disneyland is one of those things where it's just, nobody believed Walt Disney when he was making Disneyland. Like, they just thought it was a fool's errand. Like, no one knew what he was envisioning.
Oh, no, they thought they were crazy. In fact, he actually had to have his brother go and get the investment to build Disneyland. So he was like, okay, Walt, go ahead and just make up what you want. Like, have the big ideas. I'll figure out how to fund it.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like I can envision, being a creative myself. If I was the person who was doing both, I think it would sort of stifle my ideas. Like, maybe I would be tempted to go smaller on some things that I needed to go bigger on at Disneyland, right? Tomorrowland, for instance, maybe we don't need Tomorrowland. Maybe we can just have, a concession stand because we need money.
Oh, no question. And Walt's always original plan was the fact that he always wanted to create an amusement park, but something that always was changing, for the times. It was a constantly evolving park, but something that, families can always go to, both, young and old, can go to and enjoy themselves and have fun. That was always his envision to do so. And even later on, when he found out that Disneyland was so finite as far as what he could do, because so much sprawled around the area and essentially created Anaheim around that, of what we know of Anaheim today.
Yeah, sort of walled in.
Right, he got himself
Disneyland,
walled
yeah.
in, and that's where Walt Disney World came about, because he realized, he's like, I don't want to do that. I want to have this problem ever again. So literally, his team, they went to Florida. They scoped out a whole bunch of areas, and then decided that they're going to build this in Orlando. And they just bought swampland at like dirt cheap prices, and just bought as much as they possibly can, so that this way Walt would never have a problem ever again in having any kind of space issues.
Well, and people, pay thousands of dollars to fly to Orlando and buy tickets to Disney World. It's like one of those, if you build it, they can come dream stories, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Which I think is really inspiring as a creative. I know my dad is really inspired by Walt Disney. And he's funny because he thinks about like the studio that he built and the team that he built, like all the people of art, all the artists, teams of artists and artisans and craftspeople that it took to run Disney Studios. And, that's no small feat, right? And that's a lot of logistics, that's a lot of moving parts, especially for a creative to sort of head up, because I say it's creatives as sort of like not practical people.
Yes. And Walt was definitely not a practical person. But that's one of the things that's one of the things I admired about him. And it's also the same thing true with, I loved his attention to detail. I really liked and admired that aspect of him. And I can go all day long as all the different stories that I know of Walt Disney. And, some of them are true, some of them are not. Like, for example, little things like, if you ever go into a Disney park, there's no gum ever sold in any of the stores, and that goes all the way back to Walt Disney.
Oh, wow.
And so, because he found when the park opened that there would be like gum on the floor, things like that, and he just thought it was just such a disgusting thing, and also they would have to clean it up. And he was very big about cleanliness in his parks, so he just banned gum from being sold in the parks. And those things still ring true today. Like, even after he passed, a lot of people who took the mantle understood and respected that level to detail. In fact, when they built the Magic Kingdom, it's actually on a second level. So when actually you go into the park, there's a whole level underneath it. They actually built up. And one of the things that they did this time around was when they built Main Street, it's actually at an angle. It's actually at an incline.
Oh, really? Why is that?
The biggest reason why is when people leave the park, so that they're actually, when they leave, they're going on a decline, which helps out for two reasons.
Wow.
One is for the fact that at the end of the day, everyone's tired. So this is a lot easier on people's feet.
Oh, my gosh.
But also the second thing, too, is that it makes it quicker for people to leave the park.
So they can get people in and out.
Oh
my goodness.
So it's those little things, but again, it comes down to the Pareto principle, right? It's like sometimes those little things make a huge difference, and I'm sure that has helped out immensely with their parks and doing exactly what they were intending it to do, making it so much easier for people to leave the park, so it gives more time for their crew to clean up and get everything ready for the next day.
Right. Well, you're kind of getting me to nerd out a little bit here because I'm a big fan of success by design. And especially even in practical things, like to me, design matters, and it contributes to all kinds of things like overall happiness and well-being. I mean, just look at the way that you design a room. Your bedroom could make you feel better, or cleaning your house somehow has this effect on your brain. It just makes your soul feel cleaner. I think that's a very good example of that. And I know another shared love of ours is Apple products.
Yes.
And Steve Jobs. And I think one of the things that Apple has lost in that time after Steve Jobs passed away, I think the company, this is one of the things that people said when Tim Cook took over the company, they were a little bit concerned that he was a little bit more left-brained and not as innovative. And I kind of have noticed some feature creeping into the iPhone, like there's it takes 3 clicks to get somewhere important, like on your music, and as opposed to like before, it was always like you hear Steve yelling at people, be like, no, it has to happen in 1 click or else it's no good. Oh
no, I 100% agree. I mean, people like Walt Disney and Steve Jobs are truly unique people in the sense of that they really think through about the design of things, and it's so challenging to be able to pass that along to other people, because it requires a very specific kind of mindset. Even Disney, even as successful as it is today and still as innovative as it is nowhere near in comparison to what Walt Disney was when he was alive. And same thing true with Steve Jobs, of course, as well. And Tim Cook, I think, is still doing a spectacular job. But there's no question, ever since that Steve Jobs has passed, the innovation of Apple has no question has declined. And you're right, we're seeing a lot of feature creep right now into their products, and
you're seeing a lot of forced upgrades and things that seem more profit driven than product driven.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, companies go through their cycles and things like that too. And Apple, even to this day, is still, I would consider, one of the most innovative companies in the world of what they have accomplished during its lifespan up until this point. And I'm hoping that is something that can come back in the future. I mean, every company goes through those, even Disney. I mean, you see, in the 70s and 80s, they were in a lot of trouble. They were, I think, almost close to bankruptcy back then.
Eisenstein. Yeah.
So it was, but then, of course, when Michael Eisner came aboard, a lot, especially in the beginning, he's done a lot to revitalize that company and bring it back to, essentially what everyone considers the golden age, where we have classics like The Little Mermaid and The Lion King and Aladdin, all those films, and that brought them into another era. And even then, as recent as I think 10, 20 years ago, the parks weren't doing that well either. And now the parks are the major driving factor of Disney, of the entire corporation.
Yeah.
So, they all go through their ebbs and flows. Disney is killing it right now, but right now they're being smart, and instead of innovating internally, they're acquiring as many innovative and creative properties as possible, and not just utilizing them correctly, but also making sure that they stay out of the way of the creative.
Right.
And I think that was a very smart move for Disney to be at, where if they are having struggles innovating internally, get innovators outside of it, like bringing in Pixar, for example, and bringing on truly innovative people like John Lasseter, and getting them more and more involved with the company.
I just started Ed Catmull's book, Creativity Inc.
Oh, that was incredible. I finished that not too long ago, in fact.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Like he said, even the design of the table, like they had this long boardroom table, and they found that pretty quickly, like 40 people in a room would stratify into like classes of like important, like not important. You get to speak, you don't get to speak, and they even ended up with name cards at one point. And it was just this sort of power dynamic that they didn't want at Pixar, and so they actually had to bring in a round table to like help to even out, so everybody felt like they had a voice and a contribution, because that's where the creativity came from the bottom or the top. Yep. And the funny thing is that he said that even after they changed the table, that there was still this lingering like culture of name cards that happened, like that the structure that everybody sort of still stepped to, even after the long board table was removed and this like more cohesive like round table had come in. And it like literally the design of the room, the shape of the room affected the people dynamic and what kind of innovation was able to occur.
Absolutely. It made everyone feel so inclusive to the conversation. One of the things I also like
when they changed it,
when they changed it up, exactly, they felt so much more involved, and that's when, like you said, a lot of the creativity happens, because when somebody speaks up, no matter what their role is, everyone can have a good idea, or sometimes even bad ideas or okay ideas can lead to good ideas.
Right.
And that's the whole point, is make sure that everyone has those conversations and come from different perspectives, and that's when you start landing on things that are just truly golden.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I'm going to tangent all over the place. I apologize in advance, but this is my podcast, so
we tangent all the time. I'm so used to this. That's fine.
And I'll try not to forget my tangent while I'm caveating the tangent. So one of the things that I have noticed is that when you oh God! Now I really forgot my train of thought.
You tangent off your tangent.
I just fell off the tangent wagon. So you're saying like the thing about the table, and then man, I don't know.
We're talking about like the name cards and contributing to, everyone being able to contribute.
Bad ideas. We're talking about bad ideas.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so like one of the things that happened to me as a music producer was that because all music production has become at your fingertips, in one place on a computer, that there was sort of this thing that happened where I was never okay with making a demo. And, a lot of people in the industry say, well, there's no such thing as demos anymore. And that's true if you're shopping your material. But if you're writing, it's really important to be able to just get an idea out and not judge it. And it wasn't until I realized that the editor phase, the red pencil doesn't come out until after you're done writing, that I had the ability to kind of start creating again, because I was blocked. Like I would sit down, and if it wasn't coming out like this finished masterpiece right off the table, it was like canned. And that just meant I wasn't writing. And so I found that this process of like being able to say the most obvious dumb idea possible, that half the time it would be the most brilliant idea possible, and the other half the time it would make everybody laugh. And then that would spawn someone else's great idea. And then all of a sudden you're off to the races. And, so I thought a lot about the structure of, how we go about creating something, and also the space that we create for that to occur, not just physically, but also in time. How do you create enough time for yourself to not have all the pressures of I gotta Instagram this, I gotta get this many people to my show, I gotta blah blah blah, I gotta do all these things, I gotta figure out how I'm gonna sell it and pay my rent. I think that defeats the artistic impulse.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely, I feel, a double-edged sword, because sometimes I find that when you have those kind of pressures and deadlines, that whether they are artificial or not, that sometimes that can help spark really great ideas, because you're forcing yourself to come up with something to put out there instead of just having all the time in the world. Where sometimes if you have all the time in the world, then you may just start, waiting until something is perfect to put it out there, and then nothing happens, or it takes way too long for anything to really occur. So I find that sometimes they can be beneficial, but also can be stifling as well, because if you're under that pressure and you're just like, okay, well, I just need to get this out, if you took a little bit extra time, you might have gotten something that would have been amazing. So
yeah,
it's definitely,
it can be a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find amazing is like taking the GarageBand approach to getting an idea out. Like literally most of my ideas now happen on voice memo, because I don't want to overthink it. In the creative phase, I want to get it out as fast as possible while the zip is there and while everything's there. And then later, I like to go back and mine those ideas for brilliance, and like actually maybe take a step where I sit down with someone else and like, hey, let's lay down a guitar track on this. Let's take this and flesh it out. But I almost kind of feel like there's a storyboarding phase. Like if you ever watch, Disney, they don't start painting frames right away. They storyboard the shit out of it, and then they literally go and they say, all right, well, we're gonna actually put voices to this, and we're gonna like make the movie before we make the movie, and we're gonna see how it's working. And they'll cut scenes. I mean, I was watching I think it was Jungle Book, and they had like a whole scene that they cut out that was supposed to be like the Beatles. The vultures were the Beatles, and this whole scene, and it like got canned because it just wasn't playing. They had this rhino, that character that they thought was going to be the comic relief, but it just didn't work. It didn't pace well, and so rather than spend $60 million animating this scene in the movie, they actually cut it before they ever made it, because they knew that it wasn't a part of the arc of the story.
Absolutely. I find that, especially with the creative process, you need to, I think that's where the combination of the deadlines but also taking the time comes in really handy, because when it comes to creative, I find that you should keep on pumping things out as you go along the way, but have the process down. And even you said yourself, you come up with an idea, you immediately put it down, good or bad, or whatever the case is, so you can revisit later and then tweak it and do different things. Even for myself, when I come up with an idea of what I want to do, what I usually will do is I'll first write it down immediately so I don't forget it, but then I'll start asking my very close circle of people that I know and trust. And I might agree with them, I might not disagree with them, but right now I'm just looking for that immediate feedback.
Right, because the immediate feedback is super valuable.
Right.
Because this is somebody's honest opinion.
Right, it's their honest opinion, and it's people that I know are going to be my honest opinion. Like, obviously, you are one of them, but there's other people that I also will reach out to, so I get multiple different perspectives and ideas, and then I can bounce off of that saying, okay, do I really have something here, or does it need to be tweaked, or is it just absolutely horrible? And
yeah, I find I tend to do the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and it helps me out so much to determine, okay, is this something that I should continue with, or should I tweak maybe, or is it something can I do this now? If not, maybe I'll shelve it and I'll just keep it in place and reverse it later.
The real idea is the idea within that idea that you just had.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's the thing. You get like ideaception going on, right? Where like all of a sudden like this idea spawned another idea.
Yeah.
And to actually bring this back a little bit to Pixar, for example, one of my favorite quotes from Ed Catmull, in fact, is the fact that every single Pixar film that ever came out started with a really bad idea. Like, they said every single story, and he was dead serious. He's like, every story that they've ever wrote, from Toy Story up until now, every single one started as just a bad movie. Like, horribly. But they needed that jumping off point. They needed something to start off with that will help them get to where they are now. And they keep on tweaking it and keep on perfecting it and keep on doing those things. But that's the whole point, right? Is that if they sat down and were hashing out, trying to hash out the story and didn't communicate with each other, bouncing ideas off each other until they were proud of what they've accomplished, it would take them probably way too long. And then they would be like, all right, we're too far into this process now to really do anything about it. We just have to go with it. And the movie would have been mediocre. Like
half the movies that come out in the animated space, I think.
Right.
Now.
Exactly. Because, they take too much time, or, they don't really spend enough time tweaking that process up. And I'm not sure how the other animation studios do it, but from what I've read from Pixar is the fact that they go through that process and they make it open communication with all the entire team, asking ideas and throwing things out early, but at the beginning. And obviously, as the public, we don't get that access to that information, so we have no idea. We just think that they just made another Golden Crown movie that is absolutely incredible, but it was all this time that was spent behind it that was tweaking it along the way until we got the final product. And I think that's where the combination of, as a creative, taking the time to create something, but also the same token is that you're constantly pumping out something. Yeah. And it's just may not necessarily be in front of everybody at the same time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I want to segue into entrepreneurship, which is a topic that's very near and dear to your heart.
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, this is a guy who has told me, I don't know if he's told the world this, but that his idol is Richard Branson.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, Richard. he's an interesting character. I very much admire him.
Yeah. And just the talking about, creativity in terms of something that is applied to business, which I don't think a lot of people think about, but starting new businesses in particular, not necessarily running them, but starting them like Richard Branson does, is a very creative frame of mind.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's when you're starting a company, literally there's truly no rules. There really isn't. There's maybe guidelines, just like there is with art, but at the end of the day, it's your creation. You can do any way that you really see fit that makes sense for you. There is
within
really
the law.
Within the law. Okay, yes.
Depending on which country you're in,
right?
Too. You
exactly.
might be able to. Or you can go off world like what's his name is trying to do, Tony Stark. SpaceX guy.
Yeah, Tony Stark. Yes. Elon Musk is Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Which, fun fact, he's actually made a cameo in Iron Man 2. But,
that's incredible.
Yeah, but anyway, so... but that's the thing with entrepreneurship is the fact that, really, you find what guidelines that you have, and those guidelines are, yes, the law is one of them, but other things too, your capabilities, what your skill sets are, what your resources that you have available, and seeing what you want to create out of it, and what you find, what fulfills you at the end of the day, what ultimately fulfills you. Yeah. When I started 820 Records, for example, I've never went to music business school. I didn't, do any kind of internships. I did nothing that, in retrospect could have definitely helped me out, but I didn't have any of those things.
Yeah.
I was I was a band nerd. I played Magic the Gathering. I played all these different things. Like I was like I never really even went to concerts, honestly, when I started 820 Records.
Wow.
I've never went to a local show ever in my life.
Yeah.
And I think I can probably count on one hand at the time the number of of concerts I went to.
Yeah.
I was never that kind of kid. And
so you just thought, I want to make money. Let's pick music.
right. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I said it.
Let me give most of my money away.
Yeah, right?
He gives an 80% royalty,
Yeah,
by the way. That's actually one of the things that got me introduced to Mike was the kind of zaniness of his concept and how awesomely big and impossible it was.
Well, I mean, I started because I honestly, this is a funny story. I started 820 Records because when at that time, this is when the RIAA was suing everybody left and right.
Yeah.
So this is back in like the early to mid, probably mid 2000s at this point.
Gold-plated swimming pools.
Right.
I'm only gonna have 2 gold-plated swimming pools.
Right. Oh, I remember that. I remember that so well. That was Weird Al, wasn't it?
I don't recall, but yeah.
He had something like that in one of his things because he had like a whole thing about don't download this song.
Yes.
It was one of my favorites, and I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, but the RIAA was kind of being a little heavy-handed at the time.
Yeah, they were being a big bully for. I mean, I understand. As a creative, it hurts so much when people pirate your music. But the same token too, I thought that I mean, give or take, in the long term here, it was fairly effective. I just think that it's also done quite a bit of damage to the reputation of the RIAA and as well as the record labels that I don't think can ever be repaired at this point.
Yeah.
I think it tarnished a lot of their image when they were in turn trying to, protect the artists ultimately. But, that was the whole point is I felt that this could have been done so much better because also they were getting hit on both ends. They're getting hit on the consumer end of backlash, but also on the artist end too, because all of a sudden now a lot of artists were coming out saying, we don't believe in what their labels are doing. Or in fact, our deals with the labels are complete crap.
They're crooked.
They're crooked. And so at the time, I was trying to find out what I wanted to land on. And actually my partner, he suggested starting a record label. And I was just so fired up about the music industry and wanting to make change and try to, instead of trying to fight what was like clearly, digital downloads at that time is what clearly wasn't going away, and there was
an innovation.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I was so fired up. I said, well, let's try to figure out how to make a record label work in this kind of environment, in this kind of a world where things are that most music was digitally downloaded, and now is streaming. It's completely different now too. So I knew that I at the time saying, okay, if we're gonna do a label, how can we build a label that makes sense for us to give as much as we can back to the artists? That was the whole point from day
sort
one.
of like as a philosophical counter argument to the current state of affairs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How can
I think that's what made me excited.
Yeah, I mean, well, same with me. Is like I knew it was a crazy idea. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what would be involved with that process. But I said, you know what? Let's just go for it. I'll learn. I literally got a couple textbooks and I read through them, just the basics of record label marketing and music law, just so I had an idea of what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then I had a friend of mine who did electronic music, and I said, hey, I have a sample contract I grabbed out of a book. I want you to be my guinea pig. I'll sign it. I'll figure out how to get you on iTunes. He goes, okay. And that was my first artist.
Wow. So you just kind of like, okay, we'll just read a book on this and let's just try it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's literally how I started. And a couple months after I signed that first electronic artist, a friend of mine, she mentioned that she knew these guys since middle school that she was friends with, that was in a pop punk band. So I went to their show. It was literally the first local show I've ever went to, and checked them out and absolutely loved seeing them live and loved the whole experience. And I told them afterwards, I told them about the record label and gave 80% back, and that was enough that they wanted to meet up with me, and we talked for a bit, and they wanted to sign on to 820 Records, and that was the first band I ever had.
You were certainly the purple cow with that 80% royalty.
Yeah.
It just gets people to listen,
Oh, yeah, because especially right then was the perfect time to really promote that because of the fact that so many labels were getting bad raps at the time, whether it was justified or not. It was definitely a very, the image of labels was that labels were taking advantage of artists.
What year was this?
This was 2008. 2007, 2008. The idea of 820 Records came around 2007, but then 2008 was when it really was formed.
Yeah, and I seem to recall that you and your partner had played around with internet radio before that. Is that right?
Yeah, so we had a company called Indie Radio back then, and when I graduated high school, in fact, I had two notebooks when I went to class. One was on taking notes, and this is notebook, so it kind of dates me a little bit. This was back in the early 2000s.
Don't you mean an Evernote?
Yeah, Evernote. Yeah, what?
Don't you?
Yeah, of course. That's exactly what I meant.
Uh-huh.
So I had two notebooks. One on that was taking class notes, and then another was just business ideas. And anytime I came up with a business idea, I would write them down. And I always had a passion for technology and entertainment, so I was always coming up with ideas that would combine those two passions of mine together.
Mm-hmm.
And so myself, music's always been in my blood. I played piano when I was 5-6 years old. I started taking private lessons and played trumpet all through high school and through college. And so music's always been a big part of my life in that way. So I decided, well, what if I came up with a website that artists could upload their music for free? Because at the time, internet radio was huge, but not as we see it now. This was like back in the Winamp days. And,
oh my gosh!
Yeah, and so where I found these various different internet radio channels through Winamp, like the electronic channels and all that kind of stuff. I was so into that stuff, so I love that whole thing of being introduced to new music in that way. So I said, what if we had like a centralized place? Because right now they were all just individual radio stations. So I said, what if we had just one location and artists can upload their music for free, and they just selected what genre it was, and we automatically put into rotation for that particular genre. And then anybody can go on our website and choose whatever genre they wanted.
Cool.
And they would be able to play that music. And we had some really cool ideas too. We had an idea where, okay, I know a lot of times when I was listening to radio, if I really liked the song, if I didn't write down or mention what the song was, there was no Shazam. There was nothing like that back then.
Yeah.
There was nothing. So, once the song was done, that's it. Like that, you lost your window finding out what that song was.
That was Owner of a Lonely Heart.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Or this was internet radio station. So they just keep on playing the song like one after the other. And if you didn't write down what the title and the artist was at that time, that was it. So we actually built in that we kept a log of I think it was the last 8 hours of what was played. So if any time that you forgot what was played, you can literally go back onto the website and find what was played in the last 8 hours.
Right, which was like not something for a while. You couldn't do that on terrestrial radio.
Yeah, that was impossible on terrestrial radio.
At the time, yeah.
So, things like that. And we built in, profiles for artists where you can check out, you can go, if you saw a song that played that you really liked, you can actually go to the artist page. You can actually individually stream each of the songs on there. You can communicate with them. We had a whole messaging system built into Indie Radio. So we had some really cool stuff. But this was something that we did on the side with my partner, because I was going to ASU and my partner was going to U of A, and I was working part-time doing technical support. I was working 28 to 30 hours a week and a full-time student. So this was literally just a side project that I worked on the weekends with my buddy, and I would go down to Tucson in Arizona and work with him when I could. And so it took about 2 years to build it. It took a long time to build this thing. And by that point, when that was finally built...
In internet years, 2 years is like 2 decades.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So by the time we launched, and we're talking about launching, we mean like beta, like workable enough for let people try it.
Yeah.
And so we put it out there, and by that point, Pandora was getting very popular at this point. Last.fm was huge. Before that, it was called Audio Scrobbler, and now it was called Last.fm.
Thank God they changed that name.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So... we launched it, and it actually did pretty well. Just strictly word of mouth. We didn't advertise it. I mean, this was pre-Facebook, for crying out loud. I think Facebook just came out, so that was brand new. So there was no
I remember they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have a EDU email anymore.
As soon as ASU came up on, I was like, okay, boom, I got it.
Yeah.
So nothing like that existed back then. So we just you put it out there, word of mouth to our friends and things like that, and we got about 3,000 visitors a month.
Wow.
With no advertising,
That's
no
pretty
nothing.
good.
So we clearly saw there was something there, and people were, we got artists to upload their music, and we also found this little community was being formed because we noticed that other artists were messaging each other too about their music and giving them feedback. So we were forming this little community. So we were really happy of what we were developing, but at the same token, we did, back then I had very high hopes of where this would go, and we saw how big Pandora was getting, we saw how big Last.fm was going, and we really didn't feel strongly that what we were providing was so different than them.
Right.
And so at that point, we said, okay, we need to figure out how we're going to make ourselves different. So we're trying to come up with other ideas on how to make ourselves differentiate from what Last.fm and Pandora were doing, but not something that they could easily copy, like try to create our own sense of community that they wouldn't be able to accomplish on their end. And so we're going through that conversation, and literally out of the blue, he just came to me and said, "How do you feel like starting a record label?" So and then we decided that's how we kind of shifted together. Yeah, hard left. We went all these government conversations, and at that time too, we were doing both. We were still trying to tweak indie radio and seeing where we wanted to go with it, and then while also looking into creating 820 Records.
Right.
And then it didn't take long to realize, okay, I can't handle doing both of these at the same time.
Yeah.
If I really want to make something happen, I need to focus on one. And at that time, we still couldn't figure out where indie radio was going to ultimately go. And 820 Records was definitely something more appealing to me of what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So we made that decision of, okay, we should start winding down indie radio and start focusing more on 80/20.
Yeah, well, and what occurs to me is that nothing ever happens in a vacuum. So the work that you did with the radio station exposed you to this artist community thing that was happening that you were unaware of until then. And you also had a technical background with IT and programming. So it's like all these things sort of like came together to make your own unique viewpoint on what you wanted to do.
Oh, absolutely. Indie radio was an immense educational experience in creating 820 Records. I learned so much, not only the technical aspect of things, but also working with artists. Yeah. That was my first foray into working with artists. I mean, there were some artists. It was actually, I do have a fun story. So back before indie radio was when I first started indie radio, I was senior in college. It was right at that time where we launched. It was when I was a senior in college. And so I was trying to get as many people to use the site as possible. And I was in a recording class because I really wanted to learn more about recording. And so one of my fellow classmates mentioned that he was in a band. And one time we went on a field trip to a recording studio, and he played the CD of his band. And I loved his music so much, and I told him about indie radio. I said, "You got to get the music up on the site," and so he's like, "Yeah, I'll be more than happy to." And like almost every time I saw him, like during class of the week, I asked him to upload it and asked him to do it. And finally, like towards the end of the semester, he finally did it. but it still instilled to me that patience of doing it. And sorry, Derek, I love you to death, but that's because I'm still really good friends with him today.
Yeah.
In fact, I just saw him this morning. In fact,
oh,
so
cool.
So he
still doing music?
No, he's not doing music anymore. But the funny part was that after that happened with indie radio, a year later, when 820 Records was formed, when I signed my first band, which is a pop punk band, I realized that they were good friends with this band,
right?
That my classmate was in. So I reached out to them, and they ended up being my second band that was on 820
awesome.
Records, and that band was called 42 Eternal.
Yeah.
That was that band. So, and I'm still amazing friends with them today, but it was so funny because I learned back then about, patience working with musicians.
Yes.
And, they have 10, and it's understandable. They have 10 billion things that they have to do. And especially at that time, I'm just a brand new website. They had no idea I was just a random classmate, right?
Yeah. Oh,
it's
okay. Yeah,
sure.
Oh, that sounds cool. Whatever. Yeah.
Right. So it made me, it helped me earlier on put a perspective on things, on the priority of what I was trying to accomplish, and also knowing that, the way that artists think. And so we developed a lot of that kind of patience, and also how should I be approaching them, how should I be handling them, and also be okay with the fact that if I'm going to be working with artists, I'm going to have to constantly follow up with them to remind them to, okay, I need this done, or don't forget about me. Like, I would love to work with you. Yeah. So I learned that way back in the indie radio days of how to work with artists and how to get them involved with what I'm doing and how to communicate with them, and all those different kinds of things.
Speaking of artists and follow-up and just constant change, you manage Captain Squeegee. And
yes, I do.
Danny Torgelson is their lead singer, and he strikes me as like lightning in a bottle when it comes to just ideas. The man never stops.
That's putting it lightly. Yes. Yes, Danny is like that kind of person. He's a
well, first I gotta say, Captain Squeegee is, if you haven't seen them live, go see them live. If they're in your town or your city, cancel your grandma's birthday and take grandma with you to go see. Because I have probably one handful of indie bands that I've seen during my time in LA seeing indie bands. On one hand, I can count the number of shows that have floored me, and even my friends. It's just, they put on a show. It is something to behold.
Yeah, they're quite amazing to work with, for sure.
How many members do they have?
7.
7 members. So what are the instruments?
So they have drums, percussion. They have a sax player, trombone, keyboard, guitar, bass, and then lead vocals and trumpet. So
kind of a sound man's nightmare.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Also,
and then one of their guys plays guitar and keys.
Yeah, So that's the other thing. They'll do, a lot of them will do multiple instruments, and including the trombone player will also have like a synth setup too. Yeah. So they have a lot on stage.
Yeah. So not to belabor this point too much, but we're talking about artists, and I think you could probably tell a couple fun stories about managing artists.
Oh, a few.
The ones that they would be happy to hear. How about let's just pick one of them.
Oh man. Okay. Let me try and think of a good management story.
It's something fun. Just a window into the world.
I'm trying to think of a really good management story.
I remember when we were at the McDowell Mountain Music Festival, I got to come see that.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I really liked doing that one. Yeah, that was a really good show. They did a great job for that. I'm trying to think of man.
Wasn't there something about getting the lead singer to the stage?
Oh, yeah, well, that happens all the time. With Danny, what's great about Danny is the fact that he's such a creative mind that trying to rope him in is definitely a challenge, and he knows this. This is why I can talk about this freely, because he knows this is how he is. But so he's the king of last minute. He nobody else is as good as he is when it comes to last minute.
And there's a lot of competitors out there.
There's a lot of competitors out there, but nothing beats Danny on any level. He somehow manages to pull it off last minute. He'll come up with these last minute, just pure genius ideas. And I would tell him all the time, why did you think about this beforehand? But that's not how he thinks. He thinks on the spot, and he does it so well. And he literally the reason why we're trying to get him on stage is that he was going to stores and buying props for the stage, and he literally got these I don't even know how he found them, but he got these ceramic moldings of mountains to kind of be representing the McDowell for the Mountain Music Festival, and bring them up on stage. And he was doing the day of. He was going around to these different places and just picking up all these different props and things like that. I think he tried to get a bubble gun and things like that too to shoot into the audience, all kinds of crazy stuff. That's how he is, but he thrives off of that, I find. That's why he does such a good job when it comes to even music videos too, is that...
Oh, the music videos are off the hook. Okay, pause the podcast right now, go Google Captain Squeegee on YouTube, and you'll be not disappointed.
The music videos are incredible, and he's a lot of things.
Wasn't there
changed.
A DeLorean in the last one?
That's a fun story. So one of the last music video that we released last year was called Our Children, and it was supposed to be this it was the first single off of the new album that we're about to, we just released as well. And so when it came time to come up with a music video for this, Danny wanted to do a crazy comeback party kind of video, and they've never done one before. And that's the other thing I like about Danny is that every music video he wants to bring something new to the table, so it's not the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, like they had the guy from Robot Chicken animate one of their videos.
Yeah, we had 2 animated videos, but even those, we had one that was claymation based.
Yeah,
and we had another one that was 2D animation. And in fact, the claymation one, the reason why that he worked for Robot Chicken was that because he used that music video in his portfolio, and he did some truly innovative works in our music video for claymation.
Oh, wow.
Some like point of view shots and all kinds of really, really interesting tactics that he was able to do.
Like almost never been done before kind of stuff.
Exactly. And that helped him land the job with Robot Chicken.
That's incredible.
So
so you're saying it wasn't the other way around. He didn't work for Robot Chicken. He actually got the job with Robot Chicken because of the Captain Squeegee video.
Exactly.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So he was, I think he was still working for Adult Swim at the time, but it wasn't specifically with Robot Chicken.
Right. Oh, okay. So yeah. So like, another good story to actually follow up with passion projects, because sometimes they pay off.
Oh, no question.
Yeah.
So with our children, I remember this, we were putting everything together, and I think it was the week before, and Danny just mentions me like in a text message going, I think we should put a DeLorean in this music video. And I told him, Danny, it's a week out. What do you mean get a DeLorean? You're like, do we even have how? Like, do we have even have the budget for this? I don't, So he goes, don't worry about it. I'm like, what do you mean don't worry about it? So all of a sudden, like,
you're the guy who he pays you to worry about it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, I should be worried about this stuff. What do you mean don't worry about it? And then like 2 days later, he's like, I got a DeLorean. I'm like, how did you do that? He goes, I went on Craigslist, found an Arizona DeLorean club, and reached out to the club, and somebody responded. He's like, we got it covered. So that's how he thinks. And sure enough, this guy rolls up with this awesome DeLorean, and we roll it into the set, onto set, and it's now in the video. But that, that's how he is. He figures it out. Like, he just comes up with this crazy idea and just figures out how to make it happen. And that's why I love working with him so much, is that we both are very similar in that way, where I tend to worry a lot more than he does at times, but we both figure out if we want to make this happen, we both come together and saying, okay, we're going to make this happen. He wanted to do, in fact, he had this idea when we first got together, was he wanted to create USB drives that look like a key. And so we said, okay.
Like a door.
Like a door, like an old fashioned door.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
A door key.
Yeah.
And so we're like, all right, how are we going to make that happen? So, my team, my brother was a partner of mine at the time, and so my brother, he actually did some research and found this company in China that actually did make these things, and we were able to put Captain Squeegee's logo on them. So we did the homework, did the research, and found out how it could be done. And then worked with Danny to figure out what we wanted to put on the key, and we came up with all kinds of ideas. I even suggested to him and saying, let's put we came up with the idea of putting the charts on there for the music, because Captain Squeegee we know as a musician's band, meaning that musicians love that band because of how complex their music is. So let's put the charts on there and all kinds of stuff, and those things sold out like very quickly once we got them released. And it was a brilliant idea that Danny had that we ran with and figured out how we're going to do it, and ultimately what's going to look like, what's going to be on there, and it was a huge hit.
Cool. So you kind of to give a little bit of promo and shout out to your bands and to your label, you have Warped Tour coming up, right?
Oh, we do.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
really
exciting.
Excited. So we have 2 of our artists on Warped Tour. Captain Squeegee is one of them, and they're playing the Phoenix date. And then we have this other band called Civil Youth that's based in Philadelphia, and they're playing the Camden, New Jersey date.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
So I'm very, very excited.
Cool.
Very, very excited to get them on Warped Tour.
Do you have dates off the top of your head, or a place people can look?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to Warped Tour's website, and they will have the listing of all the dates there. If I remember correctly, June 26th is for Phoenix, and then I believe it's July 13th for the Camden date. It's either the 12th or 13th. I'm pretty sure it's the 13th.
Cool. So I would be remiss if I didn't, kind of talk about geekdom.
Geekdom. Okay. What do you want to talk about on the geekdom?
Well, so I'm just gonna, because I know we're probably at the longish mark on the podcast, so I just wanted to kind of like segue into something to finalize the podcast. So you are a big Magic the Gathering player.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm kind of curious if because I like to get philosophical on the podcast. I'm kind of curious if you've noticed that the things, anything that you've sort of learned from playing an imaginative game like that, has that even, somehow translated into other things that you do? Like, have you been able to, could you make some parallels between your experience playing a game and being in a part of a subculture and how you were able to innovate or something like that?
100%. I could probably literally create a book on just that alone. I mean,
okay, so give me chapter one.
Chapter one. I can give you some of the main aspects of it. So, with Magic the Gathering, which if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's a collectible card game. It's one of the most popular collectible card games in the world. In fact, there's millions and millions of Magic players out there. And so what the idea is, you get a pack, you open it up, you buy a pack of cards, and it's a randomized pack, and you get, each card has different abilities and different things that you can do with them. And then you essentially build your deck from that, and then you can play against other players. So what I found out when I started playing Magic, I was about 12, 13 years old. I learned a lot about what's called deck building, because you have certain requirements on how you have to build the deck.
Because there's literally thousands of cards.
There's literally, I forgot the numbers now. It's I think it's 40, 50,000 different cards. I mean, it's huge. So you have to, different combinations of cards that you put in the deck, but there's certain regulations on how you build the deck and what you can do in there. There's various different types of strategies that are involved. And there's no question that understanding deck building helps me build a business.
Really?
Because it's the same thing. It's you have the foundation of these are your resources, and you have to make sure you have a certain number of resources in there to accomplish what you do. And the strategy of what your end game is has to be determined on how many resources you have in your deck. So are you, is the deck going to be more of a control-ish type of deck, which means you need to have more resources, and your goal is to have a slower game because of it? Is it going to be more of an aggressive type of deck where you're trying to defeat the opponent as quickly as possible?
Right.
Which means that, you have to be very fast with your resources, but if you're not able to defeat your opponent over, within that time frame, it's going to become far more challenging to defeat them in the long game. So those kinds of strategies, no question, help me build a business, because knowing, okay, what is my end game? What's going to be the long term? What can I do in the short term? What kind of resources do I have? And building that foundation for myself of understanding those types of strategies.
What kind of risks are you willing to take or not take?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of the game, of not only in the deck building process, but the actual gameplay itself. In addition to that, even I played in a lot of tournaments, and that also learned a lot about business through the tournaments too. Being a good sportsmanship. I mean, that's something that, a lot, I learned in sports as well, but also in Magic tournaments too. Having, supporting other players, having a good match, making sure you're not a sore loser. Making friends and through that way. I made a lot of my friendships were built off of Magic the Gathering. It's amazing. A lot of my friends I've got introduced to them through Magic, or I just happened to knew them through other circumstances. But then when I found that they play Magic, I'm like, oh, well, let's get together and play Magic cards. And some of my best friends today are because of that. Mm-hmm. Trading was another thing, because I have a certain card of a certain value, you have another card of a certain value, and trading. That was actually my first foray into what a business was like, because I was selling, trading cards with this kind of value, trying to see if I can eke out the deal so it's a little bit in my favor.
But still seems like an even trade.
But still seems like an even trade, but I still got the little upper hand, like those kind of things. Also make sure that I wasn't getting taken advantage of too, and doing my homework. All those things, no question, have helped me out with today on how I run my own company.
Yeah.
So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much that Magic has taught me. Because games in general are definitely, there's a lot in gaming that can be translated over to companies, but Magic, especially because of the fact it's a collectible card game, in addition to that, has so many parallels to entrepreneurship.
That's really cool. Well, a little disclosure, I have never played Magic.
Oh, well, I may have to bring decks out one of these
longer trips that you're out here and we have enough time, we definitely should foray Steve into that.
It's one of those games where I tell everybody when they ever said I want to play and said, okay, well, just to understand the basics of the game will take about an hour.
Yeah.
To understand the basics, and then to master it will take your life. Like, I've been playing this game for, age me a little more, almost over 20 years now. I've been playing that game for 20 years, and I'm still nowhere near pro level.
Spring chicken.
Not even close. And I don't play as much as I used to, back then, but still, it's a game that is constantly evolving, constantly changing. I still keep track of it. I actually, as I like to joke that I keep track of like what people do with MMA. Like, they go on and they watch the fights and they do and look at all the stats. Right. I do that with Magic. I see who the top players are. I watch when they have the big tournaments. I watch the
so it's
the
like
streams.
Fantasy baseball, almost like there's baseball cards that you can play.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I hang out with my friends, I'll play casually. I don't really go to tournaments anymore, but I'll play casually with my friends. But then other than that, I still like to keep track of where the pros are at, what they're doing, and seeing how they play the cards, what the strategies are. So I find it's just so interesting of a game, and they're always doing things that are super cool, and even to for an amazing throwback today. This year is their 25th anniversary. Oh wow! So they're pulling out all the stops. In fact, they each set they'll do almost different kinds of planes of existence. So they have like Egyptian themed or horror themed and things like that, and they actually revisited back to the original plane of the game, which they haven't done since the early 2000s. Wow. And it was so cool because they'll have references to some of the older cards or the older characters, because there's a whole story behind the game too. It's not just even about the cards. They actually have these epic stories that they are telling through the cards. Mm-hmm. And it was
which you take part in creating, right? As a player?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, they have the underlying story that happens, but then you have the cards that help tell that that are helping tell that part of the story. Right. So I don't really get into the story.
It's almost like a choose your own adventure version of the story a little bit.
Kind of. It's more or less that when we're playing our game, that there's cards that referencing the story that has happened.
Oh, okay.
So imagine if you if this thing happened in a chapter, but now it's encapsulated into a card that happened in this chapter.
So I get it. So it's like the ultimate fandom then. Yeah. In other words, the more you know about obscure things, the cooler you are.
Right, exactly. It's like if you're playing a game on Star Wars had a collectible card game, but but they had cards that would reference parts of the films. So you had a card that was or you had a tool that was called Luke's lightsaber or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's you're not necessarily telling your own Star Wars story, but what you're doing is you're utilizing aspects of the story to play out your game.
Right. Well, Mike, thanks for being on the podcast. This is always a pleasure talking to you. And, I would like to thank the audience for subscribing to the podcast and for joining this brand new thing that I'm trying out. I hope you find it interesting. So parting words from Mike, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience or any ask you have of them, something to check out? I
would say, don't ever be afraid to try, and don't ever be afraid to fail. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this, is that if you spend too much time thinking about things, then nothing's going to ultimately happen. Try things out. Chances are it will fail. You're most likely going to fail, but those are the ways that you're going to find what's going to succeed. So I would say always try. Don't be afraid to fail. And you want to find out more, you can go check out our website. It's 8020records.com. That's 8020records.com.
Sweet. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Steve.
You make your then it is